Good morning to colleagues in the United States. Good afternoon to colleagues and friends and partners in the UAE and the broader Middle East. My name is Danny Seabright. I'm the president of the US-UAE Business Council, and we could not be more honored to welcome to today's webinar Andrew Bunn, Vice President of Sales for the USA at Emirates Airlines, and Mr. Vincent Frascogna, Vice President for the Americas at Etihad Airways. We are so pleased to be hosting these senior executives from the two major UAE-based airlines to provide us and our membership with important updates regarding their operations. As we all know, the UAE was way ahead of the game on testing for COVID-19 to make flights safe and secure as possible. And Emirates and Etihad would like to give us an update on that today, on an update on their new health and safety procedures that they've implemented. This could not be more timely as COVID-19 vaccine rollout across the globe begins to speed up and air travel for business and leisure purposes resumes. I've also asked them to consider talking about the notion of a vaccine passport for the future. I should note that Andrew and Vincent were our guests at a similar webinar this fall, which was very successful, very timely at that moment. And they are back by popular demand. Andrew and Vincent, you have admiring fans who've wanted to see you again on the US-UAE Business Council webinar screen. We thank both of you for once again taking the time to join us this morning for this important webinar to help spread the word on what actions you are taking. We are pleased to have over 350 registered guests for today's event, comprising business executives, government officials, and hospitality and air transportation leaders from the USA, the UAE, and the wider Middle East region. This includes many friends and partners from government in the UAE government and the US government, from Expo 2020, importantly, from the AmCham Dubai and the AmCham Abu Dhabi, and from a number of states in the United States, from Alabama, Georgia, and Utah. It also includes hospitality partners, Marriott, Rosewood, and Jumeirah. Thank you for your support and for being here today on today's webinar. Finally, we have a few members of the press from The Points Guy, Insider Travel Report, the New York Times, Luxury Magazine, Expedia, and Condé Nast Magazine. I should note that this session is on the record, and a video recording of the event will be posted on YouTube where others can watch the show at their leisure. During this event, my colleague David will share a brief document through the chat feature, which will summarize new route openings and other initiatives by both Emirates and Etihad. This will also be shared in a Business Council update that we will send out later today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Andrew Bunn, as I said, who is the Vice President of Sales, USA at Emirates Airlines. Prior to his current New York-based role, Andrew joined Emirates in April of 2014, taking over responsibility for all aspects of the airline's operations in Singapore and Brunei, including managing Emirates' commercial strategy and developing brand profile across these markets. In March of 2015, Andrew's area of responsibility was widened to include all commercial and operations in Malaysia. Andrew, thank you for being here, and please begin with your opening remarks. Then I'll introduce Vincent, and then we'll have an in-conversation question and answer. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Danny, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Sorry, Andrew, could you unmute again? That was my fault. I clicked your mute button.
I'm delighted, Danny, that it's your fault, but I know that we're all still getting used to the whole mute and unmute thing. That even after a year, this is still a challenge for us, so it's okay. I think it's a sign. I think it's a sign, actually, that we all need to be traveling again, frankly. I think it's a sign that we've all had enough of this. So this is timely, and what we missed when I was muted was a thank you and a good morning to you, Danny, and thank you for the kind and warm and slightly too generous introduction. But we are delighted to have the opportunity. Vincent, good morning to you as well. Delighted to have the opportunity and that so many distinguished guests have joined today. And as I said some months ago, I take that as an indication of the interest and the desire to get us up and running again, to get traveling again, and to push on with the industry recovery. And I think this is a great opportunity to talk about some of the protocols, operational protocols that we put in place, but also product developments as well. You mentioned Singapore and Malaysia. I have to say, Danny, that I still miss Singapore and Malaysia. I miss the weather very much. I have to say most of my colleagues here in the USA listen to me whine about this a lot, but I have to say no one does blue skies quite like Manhattan. So I am at least blessed with that this morning. So to use a well-worn cliche, Danny, it's been a journey. And when we spoke some months ago, we were still, although we were operating and resuming our operations in the US, we were still, as we are now, very much in, I think, care mode, operational care mode. Care at that time very much was still taking care of passenger bookings that were outstanding, taking care of refunds, putting flexible booking protocols in place that are still in place, remain in place. And we believe that that kind of flexibility is a significant part of what we do, and will be a significant part of what we do for some time, I think, now. Booking flexibility, it also goes hand in hand with the kind of flexibility that we've introduced recently with our Skywards program, in terms of extending status miles and the tier levels for a 12-month period. And it's that kind of care and level of care in terms of managing through the process and managing through the pandemic that remains front and center for us, with health and safety as the absolute priority. And the measures that we put in place when we last spoke have evolved in many ways. They've evolved, whether it's onboard protocols. We've developed our onboard protocols to the point where we are able to offer more or less an entirely full service on board, and so that the famous Emirates very much health and safety product, cleaning protocols, hygiene protocols, and also on the ground as well. And that's developed, that story has developed, and this is a very important piece of the story as well, as we developed on the ground with the touchless journey in Dubai, for example, which has been a very important part of that particular piece of the operation to, again, raise confidence. So much of what we do is about raising consumer confidence, raising the levels of safety to such a point that our customers, whether it be on the ground, in the air, whatever part of the journey it is, and that involves the booking part of the journey as well, just to have as much peace of mind as is absolutely possible. So that whole care and health and safety element has continued. That continues on a daily basis to evolve. The kind of messaging, how we get that message across to our consumers is so important. I think the entire industry has a challenge as far as that is concerned. The recent introduction, or the recent announcement of the Iata travel pass, both ourselves and Etihad leading the way with Iata as far as that is concerned, is a huge step, I think, in the right direction, and step in the direction in terms of building consumer confidence. It will act not only as the source of information in terms of the travel requirements for any destination, in terms of PCR tests, for example, or what the type of a COVID test that might be required, but also to begin to act as a digital passport as well. And this is, I think, the absolute the game changer for the industry. Really, I do. Testing is important. Vaccines are, of course, hugely important, but that will take a period of time. I don't think that will settle into a sort of comfortable level for some time, whereas testing and information will still be, I think, top of mind as far as that's concerned. So the Iata travel pass has been huge for us. And then, parallel to that, we've been able to open more gateways. I'm delighted that we've opened more gateways since we last spoke, and we've made announcements to open more gateways, so that at the beginning of March we'll be up to 9 of our US gateways. So we're now operating double daily from New York. Seattle has just come on. Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Francisco will be on at the beginning of March. So as I say, that takes us to 9 of our US gateways, and that is exciting as well. It's a commitment to the US market for us. It's a commitment to the networks and the traffic flows and the destinations that we had spent so long building up in the US, and that's despite many ongoing challenges with border restrictions, with immigration restrictions that we continue to work around. And I always take my hat off to all of our operational colleagues, whether they be cargo, have done a fantastic job from the word go, whether it be our airport colleagues who work under some pretty difficult conditions at the best of times, and all of our network planning and operational colleagues in Dubai who've done a fantastic job to keep us operational. And the fact that I can sit here and have a conversation about commercial development with regards to more gateways open is very exciting. We're not there yet. They're not all daily, but we're making steps in the right direction, taking good steps. And we're, we're, as I say, on one hand, continuing to add consumer confidence. And I didn't mention the multi-risk travel insurance that we have that took over from the COVID cover. It's another way of adding confidence, we hope. But meanwhile, saying, listen, we're back, we're operating, we're opening gateways, we're operating our flights. You've got the signature Emirates experience on board, and we can look forward. We can look forward. There's no doubt we have many challenges ahead of us. But as an industry, and Danny, I hope you don't mind me sharing. You were talking just before we went live regarding your own travel, and we're all itching to travel again. And I joke about Teams and Zoom and whatever else. And these have been fantastic tools and platforms for us to use, but they can only be a part of the future. They certainly can't replace face-to-face. In my view, we miss a lot and we lose a lot when we're not face-to-face. So whatever we can do as an industry, as a company, to develop and increase confidence and get people traveling again is a good thing, and is our objective. And just the last thing I would touch on, and you may come to this anyway, but the Dubai Logistics Alliance, which is a recent initiative of Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai, and the visionary as far as this particular project was concerned, a collaboration between ourselves, DP World, Humanitarian City, and Dubai Airports, which is our contribution, significant contribution to getting the vaccine out as fast as possible, but with a focus on developing markets, with a focus on more challenged areas and countries in the world. And again, it's all an effort to get the vaccine out, get people traveling again, make the world a safer and happier place for us all to be traveling, and not just to visit friends and relatives, but to go on holiday, to have some downtime. So that's our view for now, Danny.
Andrew, thank you. And here's to some downtime and some holiday and some travel. I think we all desperately need it. I'm really tired of looking at the four walls of this kitchen and this office where I am at the moment. So I really appreciate the update. I'd like to now turn the floor to Vince Frascogna, who is Vice President of Americas at Etihad Airways. In his capacity, Vincent oversees the company's commercial operations in the region. His responsibilities include the management of Etihad's sales and marketing team in the US and Canada, and building relationships with key corporate and travel agency partners. Vincent previously served as head of global sales operations for 6 years based in the UAE, and held senior commercial roles in Australia and the US before that. Vincent, thank you for being here, and please begin with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Danny, and thanks for the introduction. First off, I just want to say a welcome and a thank you to all of the viewers today, but especially those from the industry. You mentioned some of our distribution partners, some of the travel media that are on the webinar today. And everything that we've been going through as an industry, we've been going through together. It's not just sectioned off for airlines and aviation, whether it's hotels, whether it's car rental. Within the industry, we're all in this together. And I think we've come at it very well as a group, as an industry, in terms of having the right messaging, having the right communication strategy, not being too forceful in terms of getting people to travel, but starting to create that peace of mind that Andrew referred to in his opening remarks. So look, it's wonderful to be speaking to you all today. I think it's incredible to think that we're about to mark a very big milestone quite soon, with it almost being 1 year since the start of quarantines in the US and the UAE. I mentioned back in the fall when we had this that it had been an emotional journey thus far up until that point, and that has obviously continued. It's been a very difficult period for the industry and for our airline. But I feel that there is some forward momentum starting to build for the industry. It's right there on the horizon. We can see it. We can optimistically look at some concrete progress that's being made to vaccinate our citizens across the world. And then we can start talking about the future of business and leisure travel in more certain terms than we have been able to do over the last few months. So I do feel that there is some light appearing at what has been a very dark tunnel. But we've still got some rough patches to contend with first. Etihad is a very different company now than it was a year ago. We've had to downsize, we've had to make major changes to our operations, look at things very differently as a full service carrier. But ours is a tale not just of survival, but also innovation at a time when that has been needed most. And you referred to a couple of the points earlier around PCR testing. And I remember back in the fall where we spoke about PCR testing as though it was something crazy, you know, something that had been introduced. We were the only airlines within the UAE that had done it globally, and we were the outlier. And now you see a lot of countries, the US, Canada, the UK, are all requiring some sort of PCR testing or institutional quarantine on arrival. And like Andrew, I'm sure he wakes up every day, you switch on your emails and something else has changed. A market has closed, a market has opened, you're presented with challenges and opportunities more or less every day. And we see that with some of our core routes that we focus on. The GCC in itself, the UAE is on a green list, it's not on a green list. We can talk about Saudi, Kuwait. And then we look at outside of North America, what about those other markets? We spoke briefly before the call about Australia and the restrictions in number of passengers that can come into markets like Melbourne, the UK with its institutional quarantine, the Canadian market now with institutional quarantine implemented for testing purposes. So there are lots of obstacles that we still need to navigate. But look, since the onset of the pandemic, what we have tried to do, like Emirates, is make the health and wellness of our passengers and our employees our greatest priority. And in many ways, we've been leading the aviation industry in our responses. We were the first airline to require negative PCR testing on board, and then to have in-flight wellness ambassadors. We're also one of the first airlines globally with Emirates to launch the Iata travel pass. And then just last week, many of you will have seen that we announced that we are the first airline to have vaccinated 100% of our in-flight crew, pilots and cabin crew. Prior to the pandemic, passenger revenues, corporate, business travel, leisure travel was obviously the cornerstone of Etihad, with cargo business supplementing that major passenger revenue. Over the past year, we've seen things flip somewhat, with passenger revenues decline because of market size decreases, but with a really good focus on cargo, which is now still on a steady ascent. That's been propelled by pharmaceutical shipments. And in the world, there are only 24 carriers who have an Iata CEIV certification for pharmaceutical and life science logistics. And the good thing is that Etihad is one of those 24 carriers. It's enabled us to play a crucial role in safely distributing COVID-19 vaccines globally. And as members of the HOPE consortium, which is led by the Department of Health Abu Dhabi, that continues to grow. Most recently, we signed a memorandum of understanding also with UNICEF to aid in the global distribution of vaccines as well. So cargo continues to increase, but then looking at the passenger side of things, that's where we actually are looking at that focus of how to improve our network coverage. I'm pleased to say that we've had gradual improvements and increases in network coverage for the US and Canada. As of March, we'll be up to 6 days a week out of JFK, the same out of Chicago, twice to 3 days a week out of IAD, Washington Dulles, 5 days a week out of Toronto. And right now we've still put a pause on LA, and we'll continue to review that. Obviously, with being a network carrier, a lot of the decisions we make in terms of passenger flying is based on where we can connect to beyond Abu Dhabi as well. With core markets like India, Saudi, Kuwait having still restrictions in place, that limits our ability to go after large groups of passenger volumes. So really the key now is, where are there cargo opportunities, and how do we supplement that with the right passenger aircraft as well? But amidst the chaos of the pandemic, we see the UAE continue to thrive, and that's only good for airlines like Etihad and Emirates. The Abraham Accords have been an exciting development for us. The doors of opportunity have definitely been opened, and I'm very encouraged by the conversations I keep seeing between young Israelis and young UAE nationals online. And I think this all bodes well for the future of business and leisure travel between the UAE, Israel, and the US. And of course, with the mission to Mars and the Hope probe, that also continues to put the UAE in a very positive light globally, which airlines like us and Emirates can really hang on the coattails of and promote our services. So in that, I'll turn back over to you, Danny.
Thank you, Vincent, and great summary and overview. And I should add to the end of what you just said, Expo 2020 opening in October of 2021, and the importance that has for bringing travel from all over the world back to not just to Dubai, but to broadly to the UAE. It will be a very, very important development that we're all watching very carefully. I would want to remind viewers to please put some questions in the chat function or the Q&A function. I'm monitoring both of those. I see a few. We'll get to some of those, but I want to ask Vincent and Andrew directly a few questions first, if I may. And you both sort of updated the status of your routes generally in the US. Anything we should be thinking about for the near future? Andrew first, and then Vincent. Any new developments that might be coming in the next month or two that you're able to speak about?
Yes. Well, the immediate developments are that in March we'll have San Francisco and Dallas-Fort Worth back online. So from the beginning of March, those two gateways will be open, and so that will take us to the 9 that I mentioned earlier. So that's a very immediate development. As I said, we've also very recently gone to a double daily on JFK and a daily on LA. And so what we'll see now is development in terms of frequencies, and I hope also development in terms of the remaining gateways. I can't give you any firm commitments with regards to the gateways that are not yet resumed in terms of operations, but of course we're very keen, as I said earlier, to make sure that we're servicing the US as we had done, and the commitment to the US remains very much in place. So in terms of developments, yes, you may see some additional capacities which will fill out additional frequencies which will fill out the capacity on the existing gateways that have been resumed. You'll see San Francisco and Dallas-Fort Worth come back in the beginning of March, following hot on the heels of Seattle, which started in February. And beyond that, Danny, yes, we hope for bigger things, and of course it's always about where the opportunities lie. Vincent was quite right when he talked about some of the major traffic flows that we have out of the US that are compromised at the moment. There's no doubt about that, but we want to look beyond that as well. The Indian subcontinent is super important to us, but as is so much in terms of corporate business and many other sectors across the USA. So we look on a daily basis at where demand patterns seem to be improving, where we see trends that are beyond that, as I said, that classic visiting friends and relatives VFR type of traffic that I mentioned earlier, whether it looks like holiday traffic. And we have seen tourism. We are seeing tourism. We're seeing also a lot of interest from our tour operator partners, which generally is travel that would be in the fall, sometime after summer, but is a very encouraging sign. And it's an encouraging sign. It's a sign that people want to travel again. Many people held on to their tickets, either with us or with their travel agency partner or their tour operator partner, and they said, just hold on to it. Let me know when we're ready to go. And to some degree, that's not just about where we want to put our flights in place. It's also about borders being open. It's about flexibility in terms of travel. And as I said earlier, many great measures are being put in place around the world to make that happen. So we go hand in hand with demand to a large degree. We want to be there also. To some degree, you have to encourage demand. You have to be there and be ready for when demand comes, and to some degree with the corporate market, that's true. But you also have to base your decisions on what you think's coming, what's there in front of you, and as I said, the borders that are open. So, I mean, to answer the question, yes, we expect more announcements, Danny. We're looking forward to filling out the US network, getting more frequencies to fill out the ones that we have now, and more news to follow in that respect. So listen, I think the fact that we've gone from being grounded to 9 destinations in the US in a relatively short space of time is a great thing. So I'm sure we can expect more.
Congratulations on that, Andrew. I mean, nine out of your 10 previous destinations is actually amazing. And Vincent, before I go to you, there's a question in the chat, Andrew. What about that 10th destination, Orlando? Any thoughts on that for the near future?
Yeah, so just to add to that, it's 12 destinations if we come back to full. So you'd have Newark, which will give you the two New York destinations, and you would have Fort Lauderdale and Orlando. So Orlando, yes, it's I feel somewhat guilty because I remember being asked this question last time, and I was hopeful then that Orlando would return. So I'm going to tread a little bit carefully around this one, Danny. Yes, of course. You know, it's clear that we'd want to be operating back into Florida again. Again, as I said before, it's going to be based on so much and specific types of demand also that would come from Florida, the Florida market. So you look at the type of demand as well, and sometimes it might be related, of course, to the cruise business or a particular type of business that would need also to go hand in hand with other businesses opening up, and certainly an increase in tourism for that market. But of course, we'd want to have that up and running again soon. So I won't make any promises. As I say, I'll dance a little bit carefully around that one. But yes, we'd be excited. At the moment, we have as an option, we have a co-chair partnership with our partners JetBlue from Miami, which gives us feed through New York and Boston. So it's an alternative, but we hope to be back there operating, of course, and we'll have to watch this space, I'm afraid. Got
it. Vincent, over to you.
Yeah,
Same
I
question.
touched on, yeah, thanks, Danny. I touched on where we are briefly in terms of our operation. So JFK, Chicago, Washington, Dallas are all up and running. We plan to increase services out of JFK, Chicago, and Toronto towards the end of March, and that's positive. Really, no view on any changes to our current gateways in the US or Canada for the foreseeable future, at least. A lot of the decisions, and you know, 3-4 times a week, we're having conference calls with our network planning team to look at what the opportunities are in terms of additional frequencies, upgauging of aircraft from the 787 to maybe bigger aircraft. But as it stands, the 787 is the aircraft of choice for the US and Canadian market. That suits our cargo and passenger demand right now. And as I said at the beginning, we are very much looking at our network hand in hand with cargo. So where are there cargo opportunities? Where are there passenger opportunities? And how does that support the bottom line? So I think it's business as usual in some cases for the US, for Etihad. But of course, we continue to look at those other opportunities with partner airlines as well. JetBlue is a good codeshare partner of Etihad also here. We have interline pricing with other American carriers that support that domestic feed from offline points in the US via our gateways as well. But again, it's all about where can we take passengers, not just to the UAE, but beyond the UAE. As soon as those markets start to open, and we have some semblance of normalcy going forward, that of course supports our decision making around the network.
I want to turn to some questions about COVID and testing and that sort of thing, but just 2 last questions here that popped up in the chat box, and a question that we received in advance, probably from some press, and they are. I'm just going to give you both the 3 of them, and you can answer in turn. Andrew, any timeline for the A380 coming back to the U.S. market? Vincent, Etihad have any plans to operate to Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston? And then finally, the big enchilada, are either of your airlines thinking any more seriously about Atlanta for the future? And I'll go ahead, Andrew. Why don't you start with the A380?
Yes, plans, absolutely, Danny. We hope to see it soon. I'm again dancing a little bit around that one in terms of dates, but we would hope to see the A380 soon. Absolutely, we have plans, and we'll announce those in due course. But it's imminent. I would put it that way. Atlanta, I think, was the other question directed to me. We operate cargo out of into Atlanta with cargo operations currently. So we are there, but we're not there with passenger operations. So there are no immediate plans. The way that we see Atlanta, as in the case with many of the big US cities that we're not operating to, is that we treat them as strong offline markets. We try to ensure that we have the right level of feed in place and the right level of partnerships. But of course, it is, as with any decision in terms of operating, it's going to be based on demand. It's going to be based on feasibility of an operation. It's a super important market. There's no doubt about it. We're currently offline from a passenger perspective. I have no firm news as to whether or not we would open up, but we certainly respect it highly as a strong offline market, and as I say, currently as a cargo market as well.
And before we leave you, Andrew, one that popped up, back to Milan and Athens anytime soon for the third-party flights, the third country flights?
Yeah, see, this is one of those questions, Danny, where I want to be able to give you and 6 months ago, I wanted to be able to give you a firm date on Athens and Milan, and I'm still, I'm afraid, unable to do that. But they remain, those two flights into Europe, direct into Europe from JFK and from Newark, have been so successful. We want them, of course, back in the system. There are challenges as far as that's concerned, simply because of immigration and border controls and border restrictions. And the moment that we have the opportunity to announce that those flights will be resumed, we will do so. They're sought after flights, hugely popular. They've been great for the US consumer, and we certainly have plans to reinstate. I'm afraid I just can't tell you when.
Okay, Vincent, Texas and Georgia.
No, and no, and no. With a very straightforward
Come on,
answers.
Vincent.
No, so I can be a lot more definitive and not dance around the subject on this one. But look, we're constantly looking at where we can operate. Are there new opportunities? And what happened last week may be what we don't do next week, because things continually change in terms of market sizes. But as it stands, when we look at the market opportunities as well as the feed opportunities over at Dallas and at Houston, the volume isn't there for us to warrant putting on a service at this stage. Like Emirates, we've had cargo operations and a good cargo operation into Atlanta. That temporarily changed into Chicago O'Hare, and we have a very good and strong road network out of those airports when it comes to cargo operations as well. So not to be negative, but I think that the key right now is to get our existing gateways humming and working well. And then whenever other opportunities come up in the future, they are reviewed on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. And let's turn to some of the COVID-related questions. And Vincent, this time we'll start with you. And most of these questions revolve around the fact that it's really hard to get a test in the US, a PCR test, in time to get on a flight. And I guess a question in that regard and then the question of a feeder flight where you have to get on say in Savannah, Georgia, or wherever it is to fly to JFK. The question of do either of you have any preferred providers that you can refer people to that work to get the test results more quickly so that passengers can make their flight schedules? And I'll start with you, Vincent. Go ahead.
Yeah, look, it's a very good question. I think if you'd asked me this question maybe 3, 4, 5 months ago, I think you would be quite right in saying that there were more issues around testing and the lead times for testing. As it stands, we've had the requirement for negative PCR test certificates since August of last year. Yes, there were some initial teething problems with getting this up and running. But because we're pretty flexible, especially in markets like the US and Canada, where passengers can go to any state approved facility to get a PCR test done. And in terms of no-shows or missed flights by passengers, the actual, because of PCR test requirements, is virtually zero in terms of passengers actually missing their flights or having to rebook because they haven't received the results in time. Many of the passengers who are choosing us, and I'm sure this goes for Emirates as well, have been first and foremost because we've had that requirement in place. So passengers themselves have done their own homework, done their education on the subject, and making sure that they are receiving it, the test results in enough time. The good thing is the timing actually starts from time of check-in or up to time of check-in. So there at 96 hours is a pretty lengthy amount of time. The average that we're seeing is actually 24 to 48 hours in terms of getting results back from many of the facilities in the US. There are some things coming into play, as I mentioned, PCR test requirements for arrival into Canada now. Kuwait has introduced something similar. So things continually change. But again, I go back to the fact that Emirates and Etihad have had this in place since August of last year. Teething problems, of course, were there at the beginning, but things seem to have been a lot smoother over the last few months in terms of passenger awareness and education on this subject.
Does Etihad have on its website or anywhere any information that refers passengers to preferred testing sites that they know will deliver quality and quick turnaround?
Yeah, and it depends by point of departure in terms of the facilities that are available in the UAE, in Saudi, in Kuwait, in India, Pakistan. I can speak firmly for the US and Canada. Again, it's very broad. Any state-approved facility and a PCR test, not a home test, but it has to be a full PCR test done at a facility. That's the certification that we will accept. And as I said, very, very few issues in terms of passengers arriving either without a test or in fact having to change their flights. And even in the event that there is a delayed result, there's full flexibility there for passengers to be able to rebook their flight for a later date as well. So we're covering all bases just in case those results are delayed.
Thank you. Andrew, from Emirates standpoint.
Well, I would echo a lot of what Vincent has said with regard to the test, and there were teething problems. There's no doubt about it, and it created headaches for everyone, and not least of which are our consumers, our customers at the beginning. And our efforts were on communication. Our efforts were to ensure that the message was continually pushed out, either direct to our customers, to our booked passengers, through our travel agent partners, to ensure and continue to increase awareness with regards to PCR test requirements. And what we found over a period of time was the message regarding test requirements got through, but it wasn't always a PCR test. And then, so you would find that people were arriving with tests and test certificates, but not necessarily PCR. And then over a period of time, because we monitor every single flight every day, we monitor, and I get a report every day of passengers that may have been denied boarding because they didn't have the tests. And we have seen those numbers shrink. And you know, as I say, it's about communication, continually getting the message out there, and ensuring that the PCR test requirement is as loud and clear as possible, whether it's on the Emirates website, whether it's through any of our distribution partners. And as I say, I think we've made quite significant progress. And I do echo Vincent's comments, and I believe that if you have a test requirement in place, regardless of, and I remember saying this before, regardless of how inconvenient it may be. And it is fair that in the US, from a state perspective, it's very, very difficult state by state to have absolute certainty on partners. So we refer generally to CDC, and from CDC you can go state, interstate and county testing locations. But certainly we've seen that the PCR test requirement has sunk in, and I think that level of comfort and knowledge that the other people on the aircraft have also had a test is very significant. And there are inconveniences, there's no doubt about it, but I see it's settled in. And I said this at the beginning, I think whether it's PCR testing, whether it's spot testing, whatever might develop, the testing is going to still be, in my view, fundamental for some time forward, because vaccines will roll out, but you know that will take time. and it will take time, I think, for that alone to increase confidence. So keeping testing in place and having testing requirements is a way of helping to increase confidence. So yeah, listen, it's improved significantly. It still causes some headaches, certainly for customers, but also for our airport staff. But I think we've made quite significant progress as far as that's concerned. And as Vincent said, the UAE led the way as far as that was concerned, really.
Before we turn to the passenger experience, I just want a quick question on the idea of a vaccine passport. Are both of your airlines considering now how you might roll something like that out in the future?
Shall I take that?
Go ahead, Vincent, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I'm sure this, you'll echo some of these thoughts, that yes, of course, we're looking already ahead at what those requirements are going to be. How do the current regulations, country by country, evolve into something which, again, seems new and different to a process that is in place, but then becomes normality going forward. You mentioned at the beginning, Danny, and Andrew, the Iata travel pass. And I think that already starts to lead into where we can go when it comes to a vaccination passport or a health passport. And ultimately, to give people some insight into the travel pass, it's essentially a mobile app that will help passengers easily and securely manage all of their travel data in line with government requirements for COVID-19 for either tests or vaccinations. So right now, it's initially offered to Etihad guests on selected flights from Abu Dhabi. We launched it in the first quarter of this year. If successful, we'll then roll it out and continue to extend it to other destinations across our network. And essentially, it allows our guests to create a digital passport, to receive their COVID test results, house their COVID test results, and verify that they are eligible to then undertake the journey that they have booked, dependent on the regulations of their origin and their destination. So I think it's going to allow passengers to have some level of control over their data, and then facilitate the sharing of their tests with airlines and relevant authorities confidentially, to allow travel to take place and encourage that travel behavior into the future.
Andrew.
I don't think I can add to that, Danny. I think Vincent put that so well. I think that's the future. The Iata travel pass and how that developing as a digital passport, not just the kind of center of all the information with regards to the testing requirements, which you will find on our website, but to have it in one app, to have it in one place, that not only gives you the confidence of knowing what you need for a particular destination, but will also act, I think, as that digital passport going forward, and how that develops is very exciting. And as I said earlier, I see it as a game changer. I really do. I think that's exactly what the industry needs, and I'm very happy that Emirates and Etihad are right at the beginning of that.
Great. Just a couple minutes here. I want to touch on a couple important topics before we get to the end here. But the passenger experience. I've only been on one flight in a year. It was Emirates to go to Dubai for a very important meeting I had on Expo in October. And the passenger experience was seamless for me. I had very high confidence in the way Emirates dealt with cleaning the cabin, the way the staff comported themselves. Any lessons learned, any new things that folks need to be aware about? I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and simply because I was sound asleep, I forgot to put on my mask, and I was very politely but nicely reminded immediately to get that mask on. So please, Andrew, for you, and then Vincent.
Well, Danny, you've done the job for me, and thank you for that. You're a great ambassador for us, and we appreciate it.
I got to take Vincent's flight next when I go to Abu Dhabi the next time.
Absolutely, of course. You have to be fair. You have to be fair. You got a lot to live up to, Vincent. No, I think by the sounds of it. The onboard experience. So of course, protocols and absolute health and safety is the priority. No doubt about it. That remains first and foremost. But what we've managed to do around that is rebuild the onboard experience and bring the onboard experience up to more or less what you would expect. The A380 lounge is back open. Chauffeur drive service has been offering for some time, open for some time. Many of our lounges around the world have reopened on the ground, and so filling in the gaps in terms of the not just the onboard experience, but the end-to-end passenger experience has been very important for us, and it remains incredibly important for Emirates, because that's part of our business model, to ensure that we have a great product on board and on the ground. And we're very happy that you and many others, I think, have had the experience that the onboard service and the in-flight entertainment remains as it was, and actually it takes some getting used to, but I think that's very much in place now, and it's been a priority for us to have that in place, because the way we see it is that you have to have the protocols in place. You have to put health and safety front and center, but you shouldn't compromise if you don't need to compromise anywhere else in terms of the product, because we're still trying to ensure that we offer our customers on long haul flights especially, but on all flights, of course, a very, very good Emirates experience, the Emirates signature experience, regardless of cabin. So I'm delighted, Danny, that you set that one up so nicely for me. Thank you very much.
Well, before I go to Vincent, how are you dealing with passengers that refuse to wear a mask? You're not. You're not dealing with them. Did you hear my question?
Is that for Andrew or for me, Dan?
Well, I said before I go to Vincent, I'll ask Andrew to answer. Andrew, how is Emirates dealing with passengers who refuse to wear a mask or say they won't wear a mask?
Masks are mandatory on board, and that's the bottom line. Our cabin crew have a pretty tough job to do, I think, to ensure that sometimes, but on the whole, the cabin experience is still, and you're on wide-bodied aircraft, you're on the Emirates aircraft, the cabin experience is usually very nice anyway. It's a comfortable cabin to be in. I don't have statistics on the number of problems, but our cabin crew are very well trained, highly trained anyway. But of course, to handle the situations you yourself mentioned that somebody very politely asked you to do it, and it's about handling this in the right way, being polite and heading off any problems before they occur. But masks are mandatory, and we expect people to wear masks.
Vincent, your product, the Dreamliner, is also an amazing product, and I haven't been on it, as I said, recently, but every time I've been on it, I've just been also blown away about what quality your staff, your teams provide on that amazing product. How are you dealing with COVID and the customer experience in that regard?
So Danny, when you fly with us next, you will see that we haven't compromised our in-flight service at all. There's been some minor changes in terms of our service offering, but many of the comforts and amenities that our guests expect from a premium airline such as Etihad are still there. We're known for our cuisine, we're known for the comfort of our seats, we're known for the onboard furnishings, and ultimately the comfort levels and an opportunity to have a premium, comfortable experience is still all there. We've, of course, as you mentioned, we've had to make some changes to some of the aircraft that are servicing our routes, namely in the US. We don't currently have the 380 on JFK, but as you mentioned, the Dreamliner is a superb aircraft that still presents all of those premium opportunities, particularly up the front of the aircraft, but also in economy as well. It's worth noting that actually in January of this year, we were awarded Diamond status for ensuring that we do have the highest standards of cleanliness and sanitization on board. And that was as part of the inaugural Apex Health Safety audit that's powered by Simply Flying. So on top of that, our vaccination initiative that I mentioned earlier on, having 100% of our crew fully vaccinated on board our aircraft, is also consolidating our position as an industry leader in the response to the pandemic, and having that balance of continuing to offer a premium, luxurious service offering with having a very safe flying experience.
Just a comment, someone wrote, flew twice from Rome to Abu Dhabi in the last 6 months and service was better than before, Vincent.
I'd like to know what flight they were on before then. I think we need to have a separate conversation about that.
Well, I mean,
that's good to hear.
I think her point is that you guys are doing a great job with it. So,
but Danny, without being too gracious on this call, I have to say the way our staff have reacted to this situation across the board. I mentioned cargo. Our regional team in cargo, the management team here have been fantastic in working alongside us on the passenger side of the business to identify opportunities. Our network planning team, fantastic in terms of the flexibility shown in making quick and swift decisions for the business. But to your point, it can't be easy for our cabin crew on every airline to be functioning under these circumstances. But the core ethos of Etihad is always to provide that Arabian hospitality, even amongst and amidst what we're currently facing with this pandemic.
I got it. We talked quickly about the passport. Did either of you want to say anything about the Iata travel pass? Maybe you did and I just missed it. I just want to make sure someone raised that in the Q&A and I just want to make sure you touch on that.
I think Vincent's covered that one, Danny.
Okay.
We're very excited about the Iata travel pass, and it will, I'm sure, roll out. Many more airlines will be on board, and I think it's, as we both agreed, really a huge step, positive step in terms of handling consumer confidence, consumer information, and also acting as that digital passport. So more news to come on that, I'm sure.
Sure. I want to spend a few minutes just real quickly at the end here on some of the wonderful charitable things you guys are doing. But there was a question, Andrew, about the premium economy cabin in being introduced by Emirates, and when will it come to the U.S. market? Maybe just a very quick answer on when we'll see it in the U.S. market.
Okay, so there are no plans to bring it to the US market at this point. It would need to roll out on more aircraft. At the moment, it's limited to an A380 aircraft. I would love to have the product here, of course, and be very happy to have it in the US market and to let our customers know as soon as it's here. It's a fantastic looking product. It's got some wonderful feedback. It sits very nicely between our obviously renowned premium cabins and our renowned economy class cabin, and it will give, I think, many more people an opportunity to experience a bit more comfort, and it's really Emirates signature style. But I can't again give a date in terms of when it will be in the USA. I can guarantee you that, like many of my colleagues in the Emirates network around the world, we will be lobbying to have the aircraft that are fitted with a premium economy in our market. So I should imagine there'll be quite a lot of internal politics as far as that's concerned, but we'll push for it for the US for sure.
Sure, thank you. Vincent, before I ask Andrew about Expo, I want to ask you about Israel and Etihad's flights and partnering with El Al, and what's the status of that as a result of the Abraham Accords, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question, and very exciting to talk about something not COVID related, right? Something which is really positive for the future. And I touched on it in my opening remarks just around the Abraham Accords and now the opportunities that gives us, not just between the UAE and Israel, but also between the US, the UAE, and Israel as well. So we're planning on starting our own direct services to Tel Aviv come the end of March. That's still in play. Back in November last year, our CEO, Tony Douglas, and the CEO of El Al held a virtual MOU signing. And that MOU scope includes provision for joint code share services, as well as plans to offer reciprocal earn and burn on both of our frequent flyer programs. And then, of course, more strategically, cooperation in the fields of engineering and cargo services in both Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv. So very, very exciting in terms of the developments there. And as I said, and I'm sure my colleagues at Emirates will be looking at the same thing. Yes, it doesn't seem like a logical point to come to the UAE first and then go back to Israel. But with the opportunities, once Abu Dhabi and Dubai open in earnest for tourism purposes, is to visit multiple places on the way to or from Israel. And then also looking at, and Andrew looked at this, mentioned it earlier in terms of tour operators, how do we then look at building with the right partners tour packages that cover all of the area of Jordan, Egypt, Israel, and of course the UAE as a transit point there as well. So it just adds one more string to our bow. And just in general, what a positive message that we've been able to ride on the crest of the wave with, that the UAE and Israel have got to this point.
Before COVID hit, I had planned to bring 15 students from my Gettysburg College class to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and then take them to Israel on a sort of a 10-day tour of the Middle East. We were booked to go from the UAE to Jordan, and then do the land bridge crossing on the Allenby Bridge. The whole process was going to take 36 hours. So I can tell you, and someone who goes to Israel a lot myself for business, I can tell you that being able to go directly between both countries is an amazing, amazing development. And it's just going to be a huge impetus for cultural awareness, for business, for all of these aspects. So bravo to both of you on your plans there. Andrew, give us 3 or 4 words. I mean, Emirates is the major sponsor of Expo 2020. Give us 3 or 4 sentences update on what's going on in that regard as you plan to bring the world, and Etihad will as well, but as Emirates plans to bring the world to Dubai for the Expo.
Thank you, Danny. Yeah, very exciting. It's delayed a year, of course. I think everybody has figured that out, and in some ways, because it's a theme about connecting minds, innovation, sustainability. In some ways, a post-COVID Expo perhaps has even more in the way of relevance to us, that we bring some of the great innovations to show, and many of which we've seen in terms of the COVID handling, whether it be the vaccines or many other initiatives since this began. And so you could, in a strange way, look at Expo and say, actually, it's an even better opportunity now than it was. It was always and already going to be a fantastic event, and we're confident that it will be the greatest show ever. It will be still bringing 190 countries together. It will still show off innovation and technology, the likes of which we've never seen before. We're still confident that people will come and will enjoy it in very large numbers, and it will be a wonderful event. I look forward to going myself. I think I told you before, I visited the site some time ago, almost a year ago now, and it already looked incredible then. It's already breathtaking and still in the building stage, and it will be a breathtaking event, and we will encourage people to visit and to have, I think, what will be a life-changing experience in many ways. And if I can, Danny, just to touch on something Vincent mentioned as well, and tourism in the UAE in general, and the tour operator comment that we've both made. But what we've seen during COVID is actually a pretty significant demand for destination Dubai, or for the UAE in general, as a safe and open destination. And of course, everywhere has its own challenges in that respect, but great leadership has been shown there. And we've seen tourism demand. It's not always about visiting friends and relatives. We've seen tourism demand. And I think what's happened now is the US market has begun to see Dubai and the UAE as a great destination for tourism, especially when there isn't so much choice. And actually, this sets us up nicely for Expo. This gives us a bit of a head start in some respects in terms of the US market's awareness of Dubai and the UAE in general. So, it's going to be very exciting. It will be an incredible event like no other. I'm confident of that, and I look forward to taking my family.
Thank you, gents. We're coming near the end here. I just want to make a statement about what you're both doing with regard to COVID relief in the region, because this is going to be an important new area of cooperation between the US and the UAE going forward. And I'm just going to say that you're both airlines are leading players in distributing vaccines throughout the world. Emirates is part of the Vaccine Logistics Alliance, an initiative that aims to speed up vaccine distribution. This initiative is in collaboration with the International Humanitarian City, which is one of the world's largest hubs for humanitarian logistics. And Vincent, Etihad Cargo is joined with the Department of Health Abu Dhabi, I think, as you mentioned earlier, Abu Dhabi Ports Company, and RAFED, part of ADQ, in the HOPE Consortium, which has the aim of delivering billions of vaccine doses around the world by the end of the year as well. My hat is off to both of you and your businesses for what you're doing in this regard. It is so credibly important, and you're going to hear more in this space about these initiatives in the future. Vincent Frascogna and Andrew Bunn, thank you so much for being with us today, for providing these updates. We had a session with Tony Douglas and with Sir Tim back in April, I think it was, when COVID first hit. It was our most watched webinar ever. We had over almost 1,000 attendees that actually logged on that day. And I'm going to put it to both of you that I might like to try to find a time in April where we can have a 1 year later update with both of your CEOs on this webinar platform. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time today. Really appreciate all that you're doing to try to help get the world back in a safe, healthful way. All the best.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.